네, 감사합니다. 직업력 개발원 원장입니다. 저는 영어가 시원찮아서 한국말로 하려고 합니다. 네. 좋은 트랜스레이터가 저보다 액센트도 좋고 그래서 우선 이렇게 아침 9시부터 아주 이렇게까지 상당히 많은 분이 아직 남아 계신 걸로 봐서요. 제가 3년째 이걸 지원하는데 해가 갈수록 좀 더 이 참여도가 더 높은 것 같습니다. 그리고 특히 외국 분들이 상당히 참가하고 나서 이렇게 약간 감동을 받는 부분은 굉장히 젊은 사람들이 적극적으로 참여하고 있다 하는 그런 얘기를 많이 하고 있습니다. 오늘 저희가 연사로 세 분을 모셨는데요. 사실은 이게 제가 최어를 맡은 세션이기 때문에 어느 나라에서 와야 되는지를 이제 거의 제가 결정을 했는데, 제가 결정한 이유는 다 제가 이 세 나라를 가보고 이 세 나라에서 우리가 배울 게 맞겠다 하는 거를 이제 보고 나서 직접 경험하고 이제 초청을 한 겁니다. 그래서 이제 사실은 세데프에 계신 분은 이제 곧 소개시켜 드리겠지만은 그 유럽 연합의 직업교육훈련연구소 소장이신데요. 그분은 주로 독일에 대해서 말씀해 주시고, 그다음에 스위스에서 오신 분들, 그다음에 싱가포르에서 오신 찬리문 학장님도 제가 싱가포르에서 만났던 분이고요. 세데페프의 그 레트마이어 소장님도 제가 이제 그리스 가서 이제 만났던 분입니다. 우선 제가 그 크리스찬 레트마이어 소장님을 소개시켜드리면, 이분은 이제 Center for Development of Vocational Training, 그래서 세데페프, 소위 이게 유럽 연합 산하의 직업훈련 전문 연구소입니다. 상당히 이제 오랜 기간 이 세데페프를 위해서 일하셨고요. 상당히 많은 경험을 갖고 있습니다. 그래서 제가 어떻게 소개시켜드리면 좋겠냐니까 자기는 그냥 세데페프에 있다 하는 것으로 만족한다. 그래서 상당히 자기 하는 일, 자기 하는 직장에 대해서 상당한 자부심을 갖고 계신 것 같습니다. 박수로 환영해 주시죠. So, 우리 it doesn't work? Okay, sorry. 우리 한 15분 정도 먼저 발표하시고 세 분 발표하신 다음에 저희가 계속 디스커션 하겠습니다.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Park, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's very impressive, and thank you for the nice treatment you give to us. Well, youth unemployment rates have been soaring in Europe during the crisis after 2008. Consequently, this issue has become very high issue, a priority on the political agenda. In this magnitude, this development has not been foreseen or expected, especially in view of aging societies. We did not expect to face youth unemployment to this extent in the past. Choosing a profession and entering into a professional career is one of life's fundamental decisions. And in many cases, we make this decision on the basis of very, very imperfect information about the available options and the possibilities, or a realistic assessment of our talents and interests. And too many times, thank you, we are pushed into a particular pathway by way of limited opportunities. Moreover, our ambitions may distort our choice, placing prestige, perceived benefits of particular professions over our talents, interests and capabilities, our potential. The choices are heavily influenced by our friends, families, and society at large. These decisions are not easily reversed afterwards. So some fail on the way before acquiring a qualification. Some end up with qualifications and ambitions which are not adequately honored by the labor market, and some are caught unhappily in professions which do not satisfy them, even if they provide them with an income and integration into society. Few societies today cultivate an ethos of work which recognizes the dignity of work, any work, well done, regardless of its economic returns and prestige. More and more, however, education systems do provide second, third, and fourth chances for those who are disadvantaged and have failed in the past. And there's a strong trend towards greater permeability between the different strands of education and increasing possibilities to upgrade our qualification and skills, even at a later point in life. Even a superficial look at the youth unemployment rates by country shows that some of the EU member states have done much better than others. The best performing countries have been Germany and Austria, but also Switzerland is doing very well, although it's not reflected here. And the conclusion that functioning apprenticeship systems are a major factor for the better performance has been a hypothesis which has been widely accepted by most. In consequence, this underpinned policies and policy targets which promoted wider application and development of apprenticeship schemes in EU member states. This informed as well many new EU policies and initiatives to tackle youth unemployment. This understanding is also underlying the title of my presentation today. I have not chosen it myself, and I'm bound to disappoint you because there is no secret and there is no single reason why these countries perform better than others, but there's a whole universe of reasons, and certainly not all of them concern education or vocational training. I would also like to point out at this point that there are fundamental differences between the systems in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And in all these countries, apprenticeship systems are not working as smoothly as aficionados sometimes seem to propagate, and the systems have and are constantly undergoing change to address arising problems. In fact, the ability to constantly adapt these systems is one of their strengths. Educational institutions tend to be better funded if there is a high demand for their services. This is obvious for private institutions, but holds true also for public-funded institutions. This relation is, however, not unidirectional, because investments, in particular educational strands, do create opportunities, and these opportunities, in reverse, also influence the demand. Meaning, also a comparatively rich offer of vet and apprenticeships by itself is an important factor in the decision of individuals which pathway to pursue. The part of the attractiveness of a qualification, and we all have learned this the hard way, is its labor market relevance, and thus the probability to find adequate employment after you concluded the qualification. This labor market relevance hinges also on the perception of employers who may value a dual education-based qualification higher than if the same qualification had been acquired in a school-based manner. In fact, data indicate that the immediate employment effects of work-based learning on the upper secondary level are more attractive to employers. Employers place a premium on work experience. Now, apprenticeship is defined as an education training whereby the learner enters into a contractual relationship with an employer. The employer, as part of this contract, commits to train the apprentice, and the apprentice commits to work and to follow the training. In addition, the apprentice is registered and follows instruction in a vocational school. Hence, the apprenticeship system today in Germany is also called the dual system. At the end of usually a 3-year period, the apprentice acquires a qualification which is closely related to a specific occupation or profession. Usually, an apprentice spends 3 to 4 days per week in the enterprise with the employer and 1 to 2 days in the school. The alternation between the workplace and the school is an important feature and differentiates apprenticeships from other forms of work-based or workplace learning, like internships, for instance. The roots of the system go back a long time. It has traditionally been understood as an ideal way to acquire the skills for a craft which require manual dexterity as an important skill. It is for this reason that apprenticeships have been viewed as a proper way of instruction for those learners who had a preference for practical applications over academic or theoretical instruction. Today, we believe work-based training is also an effective form to acquire soft skills, such as integration skills into a workplace, to work in a team, to come punctual to work, to communicate with customers, actually what the Americans sometimes call the so-called employability skills. Today in Germany, you can acquire almost 350 qualifications through apprenticeships. In Austria, by comparison, there are only about 250. These qualifications cover a wide range of related professions corresponding to the changing structure of the labor market and newly arising needs. So you do have professions now in solar technology, you have it in waste management, you have it also in all kinds of services. Some apprenticeships are offered which provide only very basic qualifications. This responds to the reduced potentials of disadvantaged groups. Other apprenticeships, on the contrary, are providing a set of complex skills and provide qualifications which, in fact, require even tertiary education in other countries. Contrary to other countries, Germany has responded to rising qualification needs, besides increased university attendance, by upgrading and continuously expanding its apprenticeship system. This has not been the case in Austria, at least not to the same extent. Austria has much more extended its school-based vocational education. However, also this has been a successful strategy and helped to keep youth unemployment low, probably because the schools were established in very close relation with industry and companies and are governed in cooperation with the employers. Constantly increasing in the last 35 years, the starting age of an apprentice in Germany is today 20 years, meaning on average a starting apprentice is 20-year-old. Some years ago, actually in 1993, it was 18.5 years. And if you compare it to Austria, in Austria an apprentice on average is between 16 and 17 years old. In Austria, it is focused on those who had completed lower secondary school, obligatory schooling. But today, those who have completed lower secondary school in Germany only constitute 1/3, it's the 33, the red part of the cake, of the starting apprentices. In 1970, this 33% were 80%. Today, actually only 10.4% of all starting apprentices are 16 years old. The largest group now, 43%, had an intermediate secondary school leaving certificate, and 21% had university entrance qualification, meaning at least completed upper secondary education. The German statistics also show that 8.3% of new apprentices were between 24 and 40 years old. And that there is also a small but growing group. In the last year of the statistic, which is 2010, it was around 1,000 persons, which were 40 years or older. This is an indication that apprenticeship in Germany has also become an important option for up and reskilling of adults. Apprenticeship in Germany in traditional occupations and crafts offer possibilities for professional development and the acquisition of a master degree after a number of years of practical experience and additional practical and theoretical training after the completed apprenticeship. Becoming a master still opens up career possibilities and has been traditionally a route to entrepreneurship. Master is a highly estimated title in Germany, and this is reflected as it is placed on the national qualification framework in Germany on level 6, together with bachelor degrees. As permeability between educational strands has increased, a completed apprenticeship in Germany also allows access to higher education, like the Fachhochschulen or specific faculties at universities. This possibility, however, is still used only by a minority of people, but it is an important aspect for the decision to go into an apprenticeship to know it's not a dead end. So overall, apprenticeship in Germany has remained an attractive option for learners. This is also true for Austria, even though its apprenticeship rates indicate to a lesser degree. On the contrary, the data indicate that those European Union member states which have the by far highest youth unemployment rates, such as Greece and Spain and Italy, are also those where vocational education and training at upper secondary level has been viewed and is viewed as unattractive by comparison to general education and especially to university education. The higher average age of German apprentices is also important as it changes the relationship between employer and apprentice. For example, 20-year-olds do not fall anymore under protections of minors by labor laws. It has been argued that German employers embark on apprenticeship training out of a sense of societal responsibility. However, results of service have shown that this reason does not play a very dominant role. Primarily, apprenticeship training by enterprises is part of their recruitment policy. Firms indeed already invest into the selection of apprentices and retain a high proportion of their apprentices after the program has been completed. We recently at CEDEFOP tried to analyze the results of the World Competitiveness Yearbook of the IMD and have run some analysis to the question they included in their survey was, are apprenticeships sufficiently implemented in your country? You should understand the survey is a question to about 5,000 business executives, which is done and repeated every year. The appreciation is highest, of course, for Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, which reflects, however, the appreciation of these business executives for the apprenticeship system. When you do some further analysis with this, we find out that executives clearly associate the sufficiency of apprenticeship in their country with the ability of their companies to be able to adapt to market changes. In addition, in countries where executives believe that employee training is a high priority for their companies, there's also a greater tendency to believe that apprenticeships are sufficiently implemented. There is a very strong negative correlation between levels of youth unemployment and the perception of the business executives. What I find interesting in these results and what needs further analysis is that companies who do train apprentices also seem to embark more on training of employees in general. they so become better training, learning environments. And this actually enables them to be more innovative. Across the EU, and I will do this as last point, but it is important, we find out that 25% of enterprises train apprentices. There's a strong correlation with company size. The fact that German enterprises are on average larger than the average enterprise sizes in other European member states is of course an advantage for the apprenticeship system in Germany. So the percentage of training companies with 10 or more employees in Germany amounts to over 60%. Securing that enough enterprises, and especially very small enterprises with less than 10 employees, which constitute the majority of enterprises, do embark on apprenticeship training, is a challenge also in Germany. Another problem has been that applicants prefer larger and more prestigious companies as employers, and thus smaller companies have frequently problems attracting suitable candidates, and worse, to retain former apprentices as employees. I cannot close my presentation without pointing out that one of the issues, and I hope you will do that for Switzerland, is the strong involvement and the cooperation between the government, the providers of training, and the social partners, especially the companies. This is probably also the one issue or the one characteristic of the system which is most difficult to emulate in other countries which have different traditions in this context. CDFOP also engages a lot in skill forecasting. And one of the results of this skill forecasting is that while the qualification levels of the labor force has changed dramatically, we had this sharp reduction of the low qualified and the sharp increase of the highly qualified. But still, and this will be true for the time to come, the majority of posts do require medium-level qualifications, and VET qualifications and qualifications acquired through apprenticeships are medium-level qualification. Thank you very much for your patience.
Can you hear earphone? No? Okay. 두 번째 연사는 우슬라 레놀드라고 그 스위스 이코노믹 인스티튜트의 컴패러티브 에듀케이션 디비전의 리서치 헤드신데요. 이분은 일단 그 스위베트라고 여기 59페이지에 그 나와 있는데 양력이 스위스 페더럴 인스티튜트 포 보케이셔널 에듀케이션 앤 트레이닝의 그 소장을 하셨고요. 스위베트는 이 크리벳하고 그 자매 그 MOU 관계를 맺은 거고요. 현재 그 경제 경력이 다양하십니다. 그 저기 페더럴 미니스터 오브 이코노믹 어페어스의 그 프로페셔널 에듀케이션 앤 테크놀로지의 그 총국장을 하셨고 현재 그 유니버시티 오브 어플라이언 사이언스 앤 아트 노스웨스턴 스위츠랜드에서 결국은 그 이 대학의 이 대학 위원회의 보드 위원장이십니다. 네, 플리즈. 큰 박수로 좀 환영해 주시죠.
안녕하세요. Dear Chairman, dear panelists, it's a great pleasure for me to be among you to contribute to this amazing HR forum. And let me a little bit talk about the Swiss system. First of all, I would like to start with the motivation I have some impression why the chairman invites Switzerland to contribute to your conference. I will a little bit speak about our outcome effect of the vocational education and training system. And then I go a little bit through key factors in preparing young professionals for their career. What are the mainly key factors that strengthen those career pathways? And I finally end up with Switzerland's education system so that you can understand what is the universe, as I cite Christian, what is the universe of the secret of vocational education training in Switzerland. I can make it short because Christian Lettmeier already talked about that. Switzerland has one of the lowest youth unemployment rate, and that's maybe sometimes the reason why a lot of countries are traveling to Switzerland and inform themselves why is it so that you have such a low youth unemployment rate. It depends a little bit on the kind of statistic that you use, but nowadays we have 3.5% only young people which are not employed. If you compare, for example, the closeness to the labor market, that means the relation between the adult unemployment and the youth unemployment, you see where you have sometimes problems and where Germany and Switzerland fits quite well. I just have a look here, Switzerland with almost proportional relation between the adult and the youth unemployment rate. Germany also like that, while the Korean have a factor 3, means that you have much higher youth unemployment rate than an employment rate among the adults. So I've often got the question, is it still worth to do a vocational education training? Can you earn money with having a vocational education training? And from research we know that the return on education is quite high. So I'm going through the different pathways that we have in our educational system. You see, it's the return on investment means how much you spend privately for your education, how much you will earn during your lifespan. The green line is the private return on education. The blue line is the fiscal return on education, which is quite important, how much subsidies the government spent for this pathway and how much tax they will get as a return. And the social return on education is the average between the two, the blue and the red one, the blue and the green one. So you see vocational education training has quite a high return on investment compared to the lowest education level. It's almost similar to baccalaureate, which is a kind of high school in our country. But if you imagine that after having a vocational education training pathway, you go up with a further education. Mr. Lettmeier mentioned the so-called master. In German, it's Meister, master education. If you add that, then you see, I mean, in Switzerland, you can really earn a lot of money with having a pathway from vocational to professional education compared to the university education level. I don't need to go through that in detail. The mismatch question as well is a very important question. All those who attend the panel of OECD concerning skill strategy, they know a little bit more about this mismatch problem, and I've learned that Korea has a little bit of problem in this sector. So again, here Switzerland is quite low when it comes to the mismatch. That means the education, the qualification that people have in Switzerland matches almost the need of the enterprises. So I think that those outcome effect was the reason why some countries are interested in learning from our country. Now I would like to go a little bit in detail what we are doing in our research institution in order that you understand that's not so easy to give answer, how we could change the system in a way that you also can have this kind of benefit. What we are doing is a youth labor market outcome index. We would like to find out which are the countries above the benchmark and which are the countries below the benchmark. And we would like to do a correlation with the typology of educational system. Means that we would like to see if there is a correlation between those countries which are above the youth labor market outcome index and which have a more closely labor market driven system. But as you will see, that's not so an easy task. So if you compare vocational education systems, you have to be aware that there is a huge problem concerning VET approaches. The VET approach in the United States is absolutely not the same as we have in Germany or in Switzerland. Why? Take this vertical line and you see the labor market needs some qualification. Switzerland and Germany is a so-called high skill, high qualification, high wage equilibrium, while some other countries, they are more in the low skill, low wage, low qualification equilibrium. That's the market side. On the other side, the preparation is on the horizontal line. Some of the countries prepare just for task or job-specific qualification and jobs, while other ones, like Germany and Switzerland, they are preparing the young people for occupation-oriented tasks. And you see, Germany and Switzerland also, they have not only an orientation towards the needs of the company, but also are countries with a multidimensional competence approach which bridges the practical-oriented knowledge and the theoretical knowledge. So behind every educational process, you will find a curriculum. So I invented the name, the curriculum value chain. It starts with a curriculum, but it starts with a curriculum design. And the question in vocational education training is, who is involved in such a curriculum design? Do we have different partners? Do we involve the company sector, the business sector, or not? That starts with a very, very important difference in some country. Then who will decide about the content? I can tell you in Switzerland, it's the business sector. They decide about the content, while we involve different other partners in discussion. The second step, important step, where we find a lot of differences in countries is the curriculum application and the learning environment. I will show you that the learning environment is important, that you get the outcome you're really looking for. So there are a lot of significant factors in this application environment, such as, for example, how much time you spend in the working place. I mean, Mr. Lettmeyer shows a little bit that the workplace learning is really crucial. We just launched a survey among US companies in order to find out education beyond school, not beyond walls, but education beyond school. We would like to measure the potential of the business sector as a new actor in the field of education. And then, of course, if you have a good learning environment which is linked to the workplace, you will get the outcome effect you are looking for. Those curriculum value chain can be very different. It depends on, do you have a national recognized diploma, means the qualification standard is applied all over your country, or do you have just a school diploma? That means you have plenty of curriculum and totally different qualification standards. Or do you have just a firm's certificate, maybe without really an explicit curriculum behind? I was all the time asked, is vocational education education, or is it just training? There's a lot of literature about that in the philosophy of education, and I just mentioned a study made by Christopher Winch from United Kingdom, which I think is really worthwhile to read. He explained that, first of all, education needs time, that I think we know, but then we have some enabling factors that are very important in order to get those qualified people at the end of the process. What is often neglected is that in vocational education training you need basic and theoretical principle. You need those threshold competencies which are theoretical but which you need in order to apply it in the field of activities. Knowing that is also a very important aspect of learning. In addition, knowing that and knowing how is something that shows you if a people can transfer what they learn at school to a specific context. And knowing how is not only to do it once, but to develop an expertise in your occupation, your field. And all of us know developing an expertise needs time and needs applications in unexpected and unfamiliar situation. And guess what? Where you can learn that best, I think it's the workplace, and it's only the workplace. So if you would like to educate people with an expertise, being creative in solving really problems, you have to expose them to workplace learning. The enabling factors also shows that there are several aspects like inbraining the competence, embodied competence, embedded competence, but what is also important, and that is why workplace training is so important, is enculturated and encoded, that you can't learn at schools, you need to be in another setting. Conceptual VET framework for a Swiss profession gives the answer to the question, what is a mechanical engineer according to the job requirement of the Swiss machine industry in 2020. It covers academic and practical skills in the framework. The host companies ensure that young professionals are trained in all relevant job qualification and in those enabling conditions that I just explained. And this is very important to raise the attractiveness of vocational education training, they ensure the next pathway, that means the access to the further education. So the overview about the Swiss vocational education training system is like that. And first of all, I start with a quote which I think is very important on an international conference. Changing education system is a hard thing, but we have to be aware that the national, I quote Mr. Sir Michael Sadler, an old researcher from United Kingdom, he says a national system of education is a living thing, the outcome of a forgotten struggle, of difficulties and of battles long ago. It has in it some of the secret workings of national life. It reflects while it seeks to remedy the failings of the national character. And I think if you look at that, you understand it's not so easy to transport aspects or best practices from one country to the other. You have to respect the culture and the tradition. Every education system is embedded in a bigger ecosystem. You see here some aspects, and what is really crucial when it comes to vocational education training is the linkage between the employment system and the ecosystem, the education system, and that is very strong in the Swiss VET. Another thing Mr. Lettmeyer asked me to explain you is the partnership between all partners. We have a very well-established partnership between professional associations, which are in the driver's seat in our country, the Confederation and the cantons. Confederation is responsible for recognition of the framework curriculum, for quality standard and quality insurance, and of course for some funding. Here you see the structure. We don't go through this structure of the educational system. The important thing is that you see we have a permeability throughout the whole system, and that makes it attractive to enter in a vocational pathway, where in Switzerland 70% of the youngsters enroll in vocational education training. Public expenditure and cost and benefit for companies is also important. We can say that in Switzerland we have a so-called win-win situation between the private sector and the public sector. You see the cake on the left side. It shows you that the majority of the costs are taken by the companies. But when you have a look on this graph, you will see that the return for the company, the benefit of the training of apprenticeship is higher than the cost. So that's really the most important incentive that you can acquire host companies to train. Here you see what happens in a company during the 3 or 4 year education. The net benefit is there for almost all the companies. Net benefit means that during the education, according to the curriculum that they apply in the company, in this learning environment, they will get the return of their training efforts. And it depends, of course, of the occupation. Not every occupation has the same return after 3 or 4 years, but in the average, all of them. And the recipe behind is this curriculum framework. So here you have the concrete numbers. Net benefit for companies in the 3-year education is €8,900. In the 4-year, it's a little bit less, because 4-year education are polytechnicians, automaticians, the very high-level, high-skill occupation. I skipped that, and I just final my speech in order to mention other factors that unravel the secret of vocational education in Switzerland. We have an apprenticeship market and a career guidance which is quite well. We have an entry age of young professional in the average 17. We heard from Mr. Lettmeier, it's 20 years in Germany. We have a bred professional, all of them do have a specific training, and we have quality insurance on all levels. I think, and the last point, which is of course very important, we do a lot of research in order to find out what works. Last but not least, attitude and compassion of VET professional towards young professional is really great. To sum up, why is Switzerland successful in matching employers' job requirements and educational attainments? It's the closeness of economy and education. It's due to this diverse education system. We have a skill and grade mix that matches the needs of the labor market, and we have a high level of learning in real workplace environment, and of course this high permeability, which I already mentioned. I would like to encourage you with some final words in order that I say you the Swiss VET system was not all the time as good as it is today. Different reform processes were accomplished in the last 2 decades, and those were the driving forces behind our actual success. That means this is a good news for all the countries aiming to improve their vocational education training system, because it shows that the transformation process is possible if the relevant actors act in concert. And I would like to say that I was 6 months in the United States, and every 2 weeks I heard the mantra, well, vocational education training is a good thing, but for other people's children. And then I asked them, you know what you say when you say that? I mean, you divide the society in 2 groups. And I think this morning I heard in the panel of Mr. Fukuyama that we have to overcome this stigma in vocational education training, and I invite you to share my dream. I have really the dream that the people will, in the near future, will live a life where we don't judge them by the educational status, but by their character and by their attitudes and by their passion and their ambition and passion towards contribution in the society and in deployment. And if we build a movement out of this conference, and I think you are the leader who strengthened really the most important topic of the 21st century, if we can build together a movement, we will do something very important for the next generation. Thank you very much for listening.
레놀 박사가 우리 박근혜 정부가 지금 주장하는 능력 중심의 사회를 이제 지향하고 있는데 거기에 대해서 좋은 말씀 해주신 것 같고요. 이제 마지막 연사가 그 싱가포르 난양 폴리텍 대학의 찬리문 학장이신데요. 그 61피에 나와 계신데 이제 오늘 연사 세 분 중에서 다 자기 분야에서 상당한 업적을 하신 분인데 두 분이 석사밖에 갖고 계시지 않아요. 사실은 찬리민 학장도 그 석사밖에 안 갖고 계신데 한국에서는 사실 좀 상상하기 힘든 일이 있는데 제가 스위스나 독일의 전문 대학에 우리나라의 전문 대학교에 가보면 대부분이 다 석사세요. 박사는 별로 없어요. 왜냐하면 실제로 현장에 필요한 일을 가리키는데 사실은 박사가 필요가 없죠. 이제 그래서 상당히 이제 근데 우리나라는 이제 대학을 이제 이름이 타이틀이 중요하니까 소위 4년제 대학도 이제 대학교라고 그러고 옛날에는 이제 전문 대학은 그냥 대학이라는 이름을 쓰면서 학자인데 전부 다 총장님이라고 부르거든요. 근데 대만에 가면 저도 이상했는데 그 대학교의 총장을 교장이라고 불러요. 왜냐하면 서울대학교도 대학교에 하니까 서울대학교 교장이라고 부른다는 거죠. 그러니까 우리나라 사람들이 이 타이틀이나 그런 거에 대해서 너무 이렇게 강조를 해갖고 너무 많은 대학을 가는 그런 현상이 나오지 않나 생각이 드는데 싱가포르도 제가 알기에는 독일이나 스위스 시스템을 자기 나름대로 잘 적용해서 적어도 청년 실업 문제는 없다 이렇게 얘기할 수가 있어요. 실업 문제는 있어도 이제 말씀해 주시죠. 예.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, let me give a couple of general comments. First of all, I have visited a number of Korean partners in universities and polytechnics here, and what I saw is something that I think people like ourselves in Singapore could also learn a lot from. The other thing is that I'm not a policymaker, I'm not a researcher, I'm just a practitioner in the provision of technical education and training. And the third thing is that we must set the context of my presentation, because Singapore is a very, very small country. Although we have about 5.3 million people, only 3.5 million are actually Singaporeans. So the context of 5.3 million people in an area of 650 square kilometers is a very, very different kind of a proposition to many other different countries. So please put that context along with the presentation here. Now, I think you have seen this graph from all three presentations, but basically we are saying that Singapore has got a 6.7% youth unemployment in 2012. And indeed that is among one of the lower ones. And I would like to believe that because I'm a practitioner, because I'm a provider of TVET, I would like to claim that it is all because of our efforts, and that's why the youth unemployment rate is so low. But it is not. There are a whole host of different reasons why youth unemployment is low in Singapore. And while TVET is important, I will highlight the other factors as well. First, I'll start off with the Singapore education system. Now, Singapore provides 10 years of compulsory education, primary and secondary, and it equips our young people with a very broad-based knowledge and essential life skills, as well as a firm foundation in English, mathematics, and in the sciences. After the secondary school, school leavers have three main pathways to choose. And you can see on the graphics that 22% will go into the Institute of Technical Education, which focuses a lot on craft level and skills-based training. And 43% currently enters the polytechnic sector. And if you combine both of them, it is 67%, rather close to 70% of the Swiss system. Although a number of polytechnic graduates do go on to the university education, you would recognize that these people have, in the first place, gone through a TVET education. So that is very important. And also, I think later on I will be touching on the continuing education and training, where people from employment comes back to the institutions for upgrading and upskilling training. First, let's look at the Singapore TVET system. The programs that are offered at the polytechnics and the ITE are demand-driven. Basically, what that means is that it is demanded by the industry and is focused on preparing graduates to meet the manpower requirements of industry. And the areas that we focus on are those that are really supporting the economy, like engineering, info technology, business management, chemical and life sciences, and so on. Very few courses that are not related to the economy. So it is very, very focused. Secondly, we look at Germany, we look at Switzerland, we look at Austria. There are a lot of emphasis on apprenticeship training, and that has been often taken as a reason for low youth unemployment in those countries. Singapore, as I say, is a very small country and a very young country at that, 48 years old. And in the early years of our industrialization program, we went out into the world to learn from other people. And Germany certainly was one of those countries that we learned from. But at the same time, we also went to look at the French system. We went to look at the Japanese system. And obviously, because we were part of the British Empire in the past, we also looked at the British system. And what we did was, we knew that the conditions and the circumstances in Singapore at that time are rather different from those in Germany or in France or in Japan. So what we did is we extracted key elements of the various systems and adapted them to the needs of Singapore. Now, we don't have companies in Singapore at that time to promote apprenticeship system in Singapore. So what we did is, over time, we have developed a campus-based or school-based system where we developed workplace-like facilities within the institution. And there's a lot of investment required to do this. And if you look at some of the pictures that I've used here, they have almost like a teaching hospital to train nurses, to train physiotherapists on campus, or a chemical plant on campus. So there's a whole lot of investment required to do that. So instead of sending students on apprenticeship training in a company where the companies are not ready to do so, we train them on campus. The other feature is that we emphasize a lot on collaborations between industry and with the economic and development agencies of the country. And this has provided us a good platform to really understand what industry requires. And there are many platforms to do that. We have industry members on our governing boards. We have people from industry on our advisory and our technical committees to advise us on the curriculum. We have collaborations and partnerships with industry. We have regular consultations and dialogues with them. And what that does is that it provides us information as to what type of manpower is required by industry, what type of courses or programs that we should conduct, what content to include, because they will tell us, and what are the numbers that we need to train. So these are very, very critical information that we get from the industry through our close collaborations. Now, what kind of collaborations and partnerships we have with industry? Quite a lot, and I have listed a few examples here. We have joined projects together with industry. In others, we help, as an institution, we help industry solve their problems. And as a result, we get real-life, realistic challenges and problems for our students to solve, our students and our staff to solve. We set up centers of innovation together with industry. We use industry as a platform to develop our staff further. We send staff for training in the industry. And of course, industry helps us in return also by providing attachments and internships for our students, scholarships, and so on and so forth. So there are lots of such examples. And not just only with industry, it's also with our development and economic agencies. The last picture on the bottom right is Games Solution Center, which my Polytechnic have set up together with the Media Development Agency in Singapore to develop computer games. The other aspect, and I think Chairman mentioned earlier on about the faculty, yes, we do look for some basic academic qualifications, but more important, we look for our faculty with industry experience. And by and large, an average of about 5 years of relevant industry experience is what we are looking for. So our faculty, when they come in, we don't really require them to have a PhD. Most of them, in fact, all of them would have a bachelor's. Quite a significant number of them would have masters, but we do not need PhDs. More critical is industry experience. And because of that, they are able to guide our students in a way that industry expects the students to be able to respond, to perform. So these are cases of experience, industry experience, faculty mentoring and guiding students. Of course, I think all the ITE and the Polytechnic students do have industry attachments or internships as part of their program. They spend anything between 2 to 6 months in industry, relevant industries, to gain hands-on experience. We do not have the advantage of spending 4 days a week with the company, but they do have extended periods of internships with companies. So these are examples of them, from the business to the healthcare, to the engineering and to the media industry and so on. Now, we hope that that was all that is required to keep youth unemployment low. But if you have very well-trained graduates, there must be jobs for them. And how do we get jobs? The economy must be doing pretty well. So I think apart from a good and robust TVET system, you have to have a vibrant and a growing economy. An economy that is able to attract high value added investments, an economy that helps local SMEs to upgrade and to expand, and as well as to create jobs in the process. As a result, that there will be employment opportunities. I think that's very, very critical. The other thing that we looked at is, while we train, how do we know how many to train? And if you have finished training them, are they able to find jobs? So there must be some balance between the supply and the demand for trained manpower. And in Singapore, because we're very small, we are able to do quite a bit of this manpower planning. Now, as I said earlier on, the institutions here, the ITs, the polys, and the universities, have very close collaborations with industry and economic and development agencies. And through consultation, we get a good sense of ground-up sensing of the industry demand. But at the same time, there is a high-level committee chaired by the Minister for Manpower and represented by people from the Ministry of Manpower, Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Education, as well as the Economic and Development Agencies inside this National Manpower Council. And what they do is that they get information from the industry through surveys, through studies, to gather enough data to form a picture of what is required by the industry in the years to come. And they translate that into a set of intake and output targets for the institutions. That takes the guesswork out of the whole process a little. This is not to say that they are always right, yeah? But at least it is better than not having any idea of what is required to balance the supply and the demand of trained manpower. Now, having trained the right number of people with the right kind of skills, the graduates will leave our institutions. They need to know where to find jobs, where to find gainful employment. And I think labor market information and support for these people are also very important. So there's a whole series of different avenues and portals that they can go to look for such information. The Ministry of Manpower, for example, have got what they call a career compass portal and a system where school students, even before they enter the Institute of Technical Education or the polytechnics or the universities, they could access this portal to find out information about what future careers they might have. We have a statutory board, which is part of the Ministry of Manpower, called Workforce Development Agency. And they co-host, together with the Association of SMEs, this system called Max Talent. And what they do is they provide information for, or specifically targeted at PMEs. In Singapore, we call PMEs the professionals, managers, and the executives. Now, they can go there and look for participating SMEs in the program to find a place where they can be attached. It's somewhat like an apprenticeship system. They will be placed with the company, while at the same time they come for training. So it's a place and train system. And there are other career centers that were set up within the community that anyone can walk into and find information about job opportunities and job matching and job counseling. Now, an important part of the whole education and training system in Singapore is this continuing education and training. We know that after we have finished our pre-employment training, in other words, after school, we go to a post-secondary education institution, our training is not done because things change and technology change, the economy change all the time. And therefore, there is a need for people who have already finished that stage to come back for further education, further training, reskilling, updating, and upgrading. And the Workforce Development Agency in Singapore was specifically set up with a mission to enhance the employability and competitiveness of Singapore's workforce. They were set up in 2003, and among the many things that they do is that they have set up what we call a Singapore's workforce skills qualification. It is essentially a competency-based certification system to focus on specific industries so that people can be trained and attain certain levels of competencies for the jobs. And what they do is they have engaged industry to form what they call industry skills and training councils, comprised of employers, industry associations, training organizations, even the unions, and of course the economic and development agencies. And their task is really to come up with competency frameworks, to map it out and set the standards and so on. And they have done quite a number. These are just a few examples of what they have done, yeah? In various areas of industry that is important to Singapore at this point in time. You know, people do not naturally go forward, or I would say, you know, not natural for Singaporeans to come forward to go for training. So we need to incentivize them and to encourage them. There's some funding and incentives that the Workforce Development Agency administers. And they have, for various target groups of clients, for the individuals and the employees, the course fees are highly subsidized, something like 80 to 90% subsidized. So the employee or the individual pays only about 10 to 20%. Even for companies who are interested to send people for training, they too will get special workfare training support, also in the form of a subsidy. And when the trainees are out of the company, they get what we call the absentee payroll taken care of by this scheme. And, and for institutions like us, we have been encouraged to provide such training programs within our institutions. They provide operational and development costs for us to set up the programs and to deliver them. This is the last one. Well, at this point in time, youth entrepreneurship is not a specific strategy to help combat youth unemployment. It is something that we want to grow a lot more. And there are various agencies that are involved in this. The institutions themselves are involved in this. Like, for example, in my institution, we are encouraging a lot more innovation and enterprise activities, and to provide funding, mentoring, and incubation support for those who are interested. We are not thinking of everyone becoming an entrepreneur, but for everyone to have an entrepreneurial and enterprising spirit in the first instance. But for those few who wants to take the challenge, we have a system to hopefully take them beyond to the next step. So, in conclusion, I would say that youth unemployment is a very difficult issue, and what we have done in Singapore may probably have to be adjusted, have to be adapted, and to fit into different contexts, different environments, different countries' culture, in order to have some effect. So, in our case, it is a combination of all these factors that has helped us in keeping youth unemployment at the level that it is today. Thank you very much.
감사합니다. 제가 작년에 난양 폴리텍에 갔었는데요. 우리 학자님 초청으로 제가 거기서 우리나라 전문 대학교나 폴리텍하고 차이가 나는 거는 굉장히 많은 싱가포르의 회사들이 실제로 여기 학생들을 트레이닝 시키고 프로젝트를 같이 해서 제품도 개발하고 하는 걸 보고 나서 참 부러운 생각이 많이 들었습니다. 지금 저희가 한 20분 정도 남았는데요. 우선 질문이 있으시면 질문하시는데 마이크 준비되어 있죠. 그럼 저기 우선 여자분 말씀하실 때 아주 간략하게 3분 내로 말씀해 주시고 자기 소속하고 좀 설명 말씀해 주세요. 네.
Hello, my name is Ha-Sung Lee, and I'm a student from Seoul National University, majoring in business. First of all, thank you for your lecture on Switzerland educational system, and I think it gives some insightful solutions for a Korean educational system, which is currently far away from what company really wants. But I think there is a risk that strong correlation between educational system and employment might discourage students who are interested in more pure studying, such as anthropology, literature, or theology, and so on. So I was wondering, is there any additional efforts Switzerland is implementing to embrace those students, to help those students get a job?
답은 한 세 분 정도 모은 다음에 after we have maybe three questions, then we'll answer together. 다른 분 앞에. 네.
Good day. My name is Ian Batiste. I am from the Caribbean, Grenada to be exact. My question comes along quite similar to the one that was posed. I'll broaden it. And there seems to be a consensus among the panelists that a tight match between the economy and the curriculum is key to the success of this. So you discuss to some degree the technical challenges associated with doing so. The technical, by that I mean what you need to do and how you need to go about doing it. I haven't heard much discussion about the political and cultural challenges that you face. That is to say, the legitimacy issue. What makes this kind of system legitimate? What gives it political authority? And what gives it the kind of cultural and societal support that it needs in order to work? What are those political and cultural challenges that you face in rolling out such a project?
예, 감사합니다. 제가 한 분만 일단 더 받아보겠습니다. 이제 체어맨보다 우리 마이크 가지신 분이 더 파워가 있어갖고 먼저 선택이 됐네요. 네. 네, please. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Alessandro Colombo. I come from Italy. I come from a very rich region. We're not like Switzerland, but we're very close to Switzerland. And my question might seem a bit stupid, I apologize in advance, but the question is the chicken or the eggs? So you have an effective vocational education and training system because you are Switzerland, or you are Switzerland because you've got an effective education and training system. Beyond the question, there is the big issue about what are the institutional and cultural conditions to improve your dream, if you like, to improve an effective dream, an effective institutional connection for the kids at the end of the day, for the next generation. Because if you're talking, for example, the other important dimension is not just the unemployment, also the dimension of the governance. And this is also true for Singapore. So the importance of the government, because when you have to write curricula together with trade unions and the employees, you have to reach an agreement. And not everywhere you can do that without some conditions. So what comes first?
Okay, thanks so much. 그러면 아마 세 분 다 하실 말씀이 있을 것 같으니까 우선 그 스위스랜드의 레놀 박사님도 먼저 말씀하시고 레트마이 그다음에 싱가포르 답변. Maybe 2 minutes and most. Okay, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for those very interesting and important questions. I think there are no stupid questions, there are just questions. And it's important that we give you intelligent answers. I think your questions are quite complex, so there is no simple answer to that. I try to start with the chicken and egg question. I mean, what I try to explain you is VET is a specific education that focuses on the function, on the human resources function. So education system should deliver quantitatively and qualitatively the human resources your economy needs. So you shouldn't compare with Switzerland. Switzerland is in another stage of economy. If you have a look at the Italian economy, you should prepare your young people for this kind of economy. What I try to show is with the low-skill equilibrium and the high-skill equilibrium is that, for example, I know very well the United States, they are quite in a low-skill equilibrium, low-wage equilibrium, but they have the college for all strategy from the governments. So for me, it's clear that they never will fit the needs of the labor market. So I think vocational education training should be really linked to the employment system, and that brings us to the question of governance. I do agree with you that it's a problem if the governance, the ministries are divided in educational silos, labor market silos, social insurance silos. Nowadays, they should work together. And again, Switzerland has the advantage that since several decades, vocational education governance was in the Department of Economic Affairs. And we just worked together with cantons, but we were the steering authority which deals with professional association and the cantons. And of course, I mean, that's a very difficult question, how you can change that. But it's so important that it's really the governance that is one of the main points you have to focus on if you would like to change. As I understand Korean system, I mean, I feel that you have a very strong commitment from your president to the institution, and it starts by this commitment. That's the first point. The second point is, I think, what can we do in order to integrate people which have a different kind of education, maybe a more liberal art education in the labor market? difficult question. A good education system focuses on individual control ability as well. That's for me the second function of a good education system. And that means you have to learn to adapt yourself independently to the needs that the companies have. So focus on a second education, maybe do an apprenticeship after your first study, because we know from study that you will earn more if you have both an academic degree and a vocational education degree. So a difficult question. The most important thing is that every country should care about their brains, about the knowledge. No brain drain. So try to find and bind your good resources in your country and give them a chance that they can start to gather experience in the labor market and to add an additional education. For me, everybody of us, we have to re-educate, to retool us 3 or 4 times a year. So often educational systems focus only on the first entry and then they are not anymore responsible. I think that's a wrong attitude. We should focus on the lifelong learning and we should give possibilities to everybody the whole lifespan. I myself started with an apprenticeship as my first education. I'm quite proud about that. But because I was in a stage in the adolescence phase where I had enough of school with 15-year-old. But with 19 years, I realized I need a little bit more knowledge. And please take everything, every activity, so that you can create a system which allows young people to enter everywhere and to go on the whole life. And then I think you don't have the problem. And then, well, one person starts with liberal arts education and change towards professional education. The other one starts with vocational education and goes on with the academic education. Permeability makes a vocational education system attractive. And that, I think, is something which you should work on to integrate the majority of people in the labor market and in the whole education system.
So, Mr. Netzmeier, do you have something to say, or just briefly? Yeah.
Okay. This comes up all the time. And I agree. When you hear us talking about matching the skills with the needs of the labor market, it sounds awfully utilitarian. But as a matter of fact, it's not, because all the skills you are acquiring this way and defining this way are the same skills you need to live. These are the skills you need as a citizen and to be in this modern society. A second issue which came out of this and which I think is a good thing in these systems we described is this individual choice. It's your choice to choose a profession. And it would be awful if nobody would choose liberal arts anymore. Our world would be a much poorer place. But you should know what you choose. You should be informed. And if you choose a liberal art profession, then you should also know what your employment prospects are, because your economic prospects, because you may decide to live with very little, but you need some to survive and to integrate into society. To the Italian. We never know. Yeah? We never know what is the egg and what is the hen. It's the old problem. Is the German economy so strong because they have so little youth unemployment, or do they have so little youth unemployment because this makes their economy so strong? And the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And I do agree, of course, and I'm sorry for mentioning Italy so many times as a bad example, because we all know that Italy is divided into regions which have quite different economic development status. And actually you have the north of Italy you have quite a good apprenticeship system, in fact. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I just add a little bit more to what Ursula has mentioned about the permeability of the TVET system. If you recall the graph that I used, students from the ITE can come through to the Polytechnic, and from those who have come through the Polytechnic can go on to the university if they choose to and if they are able to. We call this bridges and ladders. So the system has been attractive to people who have gone into the TVET system, knowing that it is not a dead end. I think this has increased the popularity of TVET over the years. And as you can see, currently 43% of the students would have chosen to come to a Polytechnic and 22% into the ITE. As for those who have other interests, you see, Singapore started in 1965, and in those days it was really survival mentality for the nation. And I think getting food on the table was the first priority in those days. But as Singapore progresses, things change gradually, and I think it comes to a time where other opportunities have to be provided. And currently we have a school of sports for those people who are interested in sports. We have a school of the arts for those who are interested in the arts. And at the university, if you were to choose some non-technical or professional related kind of programs, you have a choice. So we are talking about the TVET system that is in place. It is not a question of everyone having got to go through the same journey or the same process.
이제 제가 사회 보낼 때 장점이 하나가 항상 시간 맞춰서 끝내주는 건데 한 5분 정도 남았기 때문에 제가 그냥 그 결론은 아니고 이제 한 observation을 좀 몇 가지 말씀드리면 싱가포르 같은 경우는 제가 아마 다닌 지가 한 20여 년이 됐는데 제가 처음에 싱가포르에 가서 방문하고 그래서 여러 가지 기관 만났을 때는 싱가포르 그 당시 프라임 미니스터도 한국을 배워야 된다 하는 얘기를 아주 공견히 했는데 어느 순간부터는 한국을 배워야겠다는 얘기를 안 하더라고요. 그게 한 10년쯤 됐어요. 그런데 사실은 제가 가보면 우리가 싱가포르에서 배울 게 굉장히 많고요. 그 다음에 이제 저희가 우리 한국 사회 이슈 중에 하나가 반값 등록금 아닙니까? 이제 반값 등록금 때문에 아마 저도 이제 지금 대학 교수인데 이 정부 출연 연구소에 3년 정도 나와 있어 돌아가는데 앞으로 한 5년 정도는 급여가 안 오를 것 같아요. 학생들 이제 그 등록금을 깎아줘야 되니까. 근데 저희 그 직업능력개발원에서 한 분석에 따르면 이게 그 등록금이라는 게 절대 액수니까 인플레이션이나 그런 거에 따라서 이제 그걸 어저스트를 해보면 사실은 우리나라 제가 대학 졸업할 때에 비해서는 GDP per capita로 했을 때는 우리나라 대학교 등록금이 반값으로 떨어져 있는 상태예요. 제가 대학교 다닐 때보다는. 그리고 지난 15년 동안 상대적인 의미에서 등록금은 전혀 오르지가 않았습니다. 그럼 왜 문제가 되느냐 하면 우리 때는 대학교를 졸업해서 학점이 4.5 만점에 2.3이었어도 현대 건설에 들어갈 수가 있었어요. 근데 지금은 4.5 만점에 4.0이 돼도 대부분의 대학생들, 특히 지방 대학생들은 원서조차 못 넣으니까 한 4, 5천만 원에 투자를 하고 나서 4년 있다가 직장이 없죠. 그래서 그런 문제 때문에 이제 반값 등록금이 사회적 이슈가 되고 그래서 이 아까 레트마이어 그 소장께서 말씀하신 대로 뭐 보케이셔널 트레이닝을 받건 아니면 리버럴 아트를 해서 히스토리, 철학 하는 건 다 좋은데 할 때는 제일 중요한 게 뭐냐면 내가 이 전공을 택했을 때 4년 있다 아니면 10년 있다 실제로 어떤 생활을 하게 되냐 경제적으로 우리가 독립했다 그럴 땐 두 가지가 있잖아요. 우선 경제적으로 독립을 해야 되잖아. 그런 걸 알고서 해야 되니까 우리나라 국가가 여태까지는 그런 일이 굉장히 소홀했기 때문에 지난 정부부터 소위 학생들의 진학 지도 플러스 진로 지도를 많이 지금 하고 하고 있는 거죠. 그래서 그런 의미에서 우리가 조금씩 그 발전에 가야 된다 그런 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 그냥 이건 제가 결론은 아니고 업저베이션을 몇 가지 말씀드렸습니다. 자, 그럼 내일도 많이 와주시고요. 예, 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. 수고해주신 박영건 한국직업훈련개발 원장님 그리고